point, I'm going to turn it over to Judge Smith to begin the didactic portion of our echo.
Okay, thank you. I just want to thank you all for having myself and Diana, Norma, and Heather today to talk about the Guardianship Services Board that we have just gotten going here. So I took the bench for probate and juvenile court here in Portage County in 2021. And as Margaret had kind of given an outline of my history, I had been a guardian ad litem here in the juvenile court. I was a guardian, a volunteer guardian, essentially in the probate court. And I also have a personal experience. My son is 26 years old and has been determined incompetent. And I was his guardian until I became judge. And then they decided I couldn't grade my own paper. So my husband had to take over. So my husband took over as his guardian. And you know, one of the things that really shocked me is that how our court has always handled it is, and I'm going to get into the slide presentation, but just as a personal experience, the court's always handled guardianships for public guardians by just begging attorneys to do this. And I was one of those attorneys that Norma would call and beg to do one of these cases. And, you know, I knew that it really was not a great, that's not a great way to go about this. And our citizens of Portage County, they deserve better than that. So when I took the bench, we started investigating how we could provide this service to the residents here of Portage County and have the availability without the delay. So that's what really started our quest in doing this and forming this Guardianship Services Board. So I got to just make sure I click here. I'm not being able to click, Jordan.
Go ahead.
I did it. Oh, there we go. Okay. So we determined that there was such a need, and what this presentation is going to show you is what the need is, what our goal is, what the solution that we believe is to this problem, as well as what the future holds. So in Portage County, we have 558 guardianship cases. 45 of those are what we call public guardianships. And that means, you know, there's no family member who can be the guardian of that person. So a lot of times family members step up and they're the guardian to a ward here in Portage County. So where do they come from? Right now we have 14 referrals from the Board of Developmental Disabilities. We have 9 from the Board of Mental Health. 5 are from Adult Protective Services. 3 are from Veterans Affairs. 7 are from nursing homes, and 7 other are just somehow brought to our court. So what happens is when those referrals come in, Norma starts the phone calls of begging attorneys to take the cases. And, you know, unfortunately, that's really not the answer. And we have currently 25 attorneys who have at least one ward. Now, these are attorneys who have private practices. So they're very busy and they work in our probate court, you know, and they are retained by folks for various types of work. And they're doing this somewhat as a favor to the court. The pool of willing attorneys is dwindling every day. There are currently 14 people who are without a guardian. So we have 14 prospective wards out there who are in desperate need of guardianship services that we do not have someone to take the case. There are 8 DD wards who are APSE eligible, but APSE can no longer take any more cases because they do not have the staffing and they're basically full up. How does this affect us? You know, the wait times are unpredictable. Some people can have wait times approaching a year. What happens to that person during that year time? That is just a horrible tragedy waiting to happen. Attorneys, as I said, are taking these cases as a favor to us on top of their existing caseload. And there's just, you know, what we decided is we needed to work together as a team and we had to get outside of our silos and come together. So we approached, our goal is to ensure that every Portage County resident in need of a guardian receives one. So our solution was to create a Guardianship Services Board. And how we did that is we went to the Board of Developmental Disabilities, and we went to the Board of DD, and we asked them to work with us on this because most of our referrals come from them. So the stakeholders of this particular model that we have started is they fund the program, but they also get to appoint a member to the board. We have hired Diana, who you guys are kind of met for a second at the beginning here. We have hired Diana to be the executive director of our GSB. She has been working tirelessly. She just started like 3 weeks ago. And she has done just an incredible job of getting this set up. It's unbelievable what she's done in this short period of time. So she's getting it up and running. She's working with all the community partners. We want to include and support our volunteer guardians. And we also want to start seeking out some professionals that can help with this GSB, and she's got a plan for all those things. So we're excited for her to present to us. Meet Diana Clark. She is an attorney. She's also worked in the probate field for many years. She comes from Maricopa County, Arizona, and she's our new GSB executive director. So that's not all. What we're also hoping to do with our Guardianship Services Board is to increase the additional layers of oversight and protection for the wards. Eventually, what we'd like to do is have the GSB, who has our Diana at the head of it, right? So she's the executive director, and then have 1 or 2 social workers who are also on staff who are going to help us triage the cases as they come in so that this becomes a resource for everyone, and provide information, but also determine whether we need to do a guardianship or not. Sometimes there are less restrictive ways we can handle things. I know Direction Home has been wonderful in partnering with us already, and they have helped. They have also given us a donation to our program, so that because they have so many services, so sometimes we may be able to just refer folks to Direction Home and they can help them with services, and they don't need a full guardianship, because guardianship's not always the answer, but when it is, we want to have those guardians available. Our plan is to have volunteers who will be trained, who will provide some of the services to the wards. Our aim is to make sure that our oversight is occurring at least every 12 to 18 months. And right now the court is working with the Board of DD as well as the Board of Mental Health to get this thing really operating. I'm going to go back because I don't want you to read our situations. So we're really excited about it. And our first board meeting is coming up, I believe, next week, if I have my date right. And we're going to go through, Diana has really put together a wonderful plan. She has a strategic plan. She has outlined it for the next year. We have a budget set up. NDS, Neighborhood Development Services, has also offered to donate space to us for this guardianship services program. So that would be awesome for, it's a nice, it's in a great location, conveniently located near the courthouse, but yet in a separate building. So Stacy Brown has been very generous in offering us space in there. As I said, Diana just started literally, I'm going to say, she can correct me, but 2.5 weeks ago. So we already have everything all getting ready to move forward. But the ultimate goal is to be able to provide a guardian for anyone in Portage County who needs it. That is what our community deserves. And no matter where it comes from, whether it comes from DD, whether it comes from Board of Mental Health, whether it comes from a hospital, whether it comes from a private citizen, we have neighbors calling our court saying, I'm worried about this person in this house. He's an elderly person and I think he needs services and I don't know what to do. I'm just the neighbor, and we want to have a resource for people to go to. And that's what we hope our GSB will be. So I think what I'd like to do you at this point, I don't want to take up too much more time. I appreciate y'all joining in and hearing about this because we're very, very excited. I've been trying to get this going for since I took the bench in February of 21. So it took a lot of arm twisting and prodding, and I forget that government works slowly. I come from private practice. So we're really excited to have it up and running. And we are at our initial stages. I'd love for Diana to maybe step up here and just kind of so you can see her face again so everybody knows who it is. And then we did provide some sample situations for discussion. And perhaps Diana, you could read the sample situations and we can have discussion.
Thanks, Judge. Actually, I think the samples were prepared by Norma, who has experience with those cases. And since she's on board, she probably has the most direct involvement with those. I will say for anyone.
Before we get there, Diana, just talk a little bit about yourself, if you wouldn't mind, just a minute about your experience. I kind of said where you were from, but just so people understand what your background is, and then we'll move to Norma and she can present the sample situations.
Thanks, Judge. As the judge mentioned, I was with the probate court for Maricopa County, Arizona for over 10 years, where I served as its director, probate counsel, and also a judge pro tem for the court. We oversaw around 4,000 adult guardianship cases and hundreds of mental health cases as well. So that's where my main background in this area comes from. I most recently was an executive director for a senior center in Northern California, where we provided all types of outreach services, transportation services, and other programs and activities for seniors. So we know how seniors can become isolated and need all sorts of support services to stay mentally healthy and well. And we understand that at some point, adults can cross a line where they're no longer able to care for themselves and then have to go to the next level where guardianships come in. With respect to the Guardianship Service Board, we already know we've got at least 14 cases in the queue that are eagerly awaiting to have a guardian appointed. So as soon as we get up and running and our board of directors gives us the green flag to move forward, we'll be able to support the court with these appointments. So that's where we are. If anyone would like more information, please email me. It's dclarke, that's DCLARKE @portageco.com. And I can send you the board packet or any other information about the Guardianship Service Board to give you additional materials. And so at this time, Judge, maybe Norma can step up.
All right, Norma, I'm going to flip the page to the first sample if you want to read it out for everyone. Hopefully I'm flipping the page. It's not going. Of course, I just set Jordan away. Jordan?
While we have a moment, there was someone whose name I didn't see on my list who I'd really like to have introduce herself. Nina, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
There we go.
Yeah, I'm Nina Tomosa. I'm a public health analyst in geriatrics at HRSA, which is in Rockville, Maryland, but I actually telework and I'm from Vermont. Thanks for the opportunity to introduce myself.
All right, Norma, I got it up on the screen, so you can go ahead.
I'm not sure what Norma's having some tech difficulties, so maybe I'll jump in and then let her take over as soon as she can jump on here.
Appreciate it. We're all in different places, even though I'm in juvenile court today, so I couldn't even run down the hall and grab her. So, all right, go ahead, Heather. Thank you.
So this is, obviously we've changed some names, identities, and a few facts, but to try to, because these are cases in our court, but wanted to talk to the group here about some interesting things that we have pondered here as a group. So the first one is Susie Q is an extremely wealthy, and she's alleged to be incompetent while actively litigating a current divorce case. So this case actually came from our divorce court. There were competing applications for guardianship, her young adult son, as well as an attorney, were both applying to be the guardian. There were I can't tell you, tons of attorneys on this case representing all sorts of people, mainly because of the amount of money that was involved here. I'm sure, because we do not typically see this many attorneys involved on a guardianship case. The divorce was at a complete standstill. Also, money was just flooding out everywhere because of that. Waiting for competing expert evaluations for incompetence. This is one where no one in the family stood up, no neighbor, no friends. The divorce court wasn't comfortable allowing this person to litigate. And by then, they're in an active, very expensive litigation. And these are the kind of situations where it would have been nice to have some other protections before this, but just interested to see what the group might have to say about, because they do have caregivers, Susie Q does. Is there any kind of way to better maybe protect these people for when, I don't know, their spouse wants to divorce them and take them for everything they've got? No real thoughts.
I so again, I'm a geriatrician, so physician. So from my lens, right, that expert evaluation is going to come to either a physician and or a psychologist can complete those, at least in Stark County. I'm pretty sure it's across the board. I don't think an LISW in Ohio can do them anymore. So anybody can definitely correct that piece if that's a county-based assessment. So I think, reaching out, and involving the primary care physician if the patient has had a relationship as kind of that first step. Somebody who's had a relationship with the patient who hopefully or maybe can have seen some of the progression over time to weigh in. I think there's some questions that I would have on here is like, of course, divorce proceedings can take a long time, right? Was this started when the patient maybe did have capacity? And because of, the complexity of the case over time has lost that capacity in order to engage in that litigation process appropriately on her own? Or has she been, kind of in that lacking capacity, lacking financial capacity, legal capacity, et cetera, even prior to starting those proceedings? I have no idea on the flip side, like what that means as far as the actual divorce process. But as far as her ability to weigh in and who can, kind of who's advocating for her, I think can be helped by having that information versus like, you send her to me as a geriatrician for like this one-time evaluation. It's really hard to weigh in on anything that's happened in the past, right? Like I can tell you what's happened today. Based on the situation, I may be able to tell you, like I would suspect one thing or another 6 months ago, a year ago, but really I can only comment today. So getting other folks who've known her for longer, who can weigh into that expert evaluation process, I think would be helpful.
Anybody else have a comment before we move on to our second situation?
Hi, I was just going to say, I think it's kind of gambling to have a young adult son be the legal guardian in this particular instance, that maybe a neutral attorney would be the best option. And then that attorney can finish the divorce process and then decide if the young adult son wants to then continue guardianship after, would be my thinking.
I think what was interesting about this case, young adult son has obviously came into his trust fund at 18. And it turns out that from what we can tell so far, that's what happened. A neutral attorney did get appointed, but a lot of people were living off the trust fund of the great-grandfather, including lots of attorneys and accountants, and nobody reported the declining mental state of this couple. And I think some of it, it appears a lot of people were living very large off of their inability to either side, for that matter, husband or wife, to kind of protect themselves. And then once they were fighting too, now it was utter free for all. Judge, if you wouldn't mind flipping to sample 2. Looks like Norma's having some trouble because I haven't seen her bounce on. This one, actually, this is one I hear the judge bring up quite often. The court got a phone call from University Hospitals here in Ravenna. An elderly woman was brought into, or an elderly man was brought into their ER by the local police department. They had gotten a welfare check call after, it's really kind of unclear at this point, but the landlord or property owner, somebody was going there to pick up rent. And when she came to the door, there was some suspicion about the caregiver. So anyhow, as it turns out, police go in and John Doe was in the house, pretty severe dementia. Caregiver had passed away and had been passed away for a few days, I guess. And nobody had, he didn't have the wherewithal to call to say what was going on. So they wanted to, discharge her from UH or discharge him from UH, but he has no caregiver to go back home to. And so they call the court. And this, kind of goes onto that pile of beg somebody to take him. And an attorney's obviously not going to go pick up John Doe and bring him home for a few days while they look for long-term care. So these are the kind of situations we're hoping the GSB can kind of fill these holes. But in the meantime, wondering, from the medical community too, is there any other things we should be looking at as we try to work better with our community partners for these like interim type placements where, somebody's got to step in. There might not be any services or, even just figuring out, do they have insurance? Do they have long-term care insurance? Do they need a Medicaid waiver, situation? When it's a complete stranger stepping in, none of that happens real quickly. You got to do some investigation. So not sure. Obviously, it doesn't seem cost effective to leave them in the hospital, but wondering if any of you guys have some suggestions for us on the court side on how to handle this.
And this is like an extreme case, Heather, right? Like that everybody kind of cringes at too. Like, oh, it's so heartbreaking.
Right.
The situation, right? Like isn't uncommon. The dead end situation where you have somebody who is not able to live independently any longer, doesn't have for whatever reason the appropriate level of support in the community in place already, and yet. It sounds like probably from the standpoint, kind of thinking about the insurance piece, isn't admitted to the hospital for a medical reason, right? Like he's medically okay. So he's not admitted there. He doesn't then qualify for even going somewhere for rehab following hospitalization. So crossing through that one, transitioning somebody from home to like an assisted living or from a hospital to assisted living or to a nursing home, even as a temporary part. Is kind of complicated at best, and finances pose a huge barrier then, right? Unless he has the money to just pay out of pocket for those days, or somebody to pay that for him, if he's not already on Medicaid or not Medicaid eligible, right? Like,
we don't even know.
Well, right. And so that's the rest of it, like who's finding that information? That's
Right.
it's a huge thing. I think from a health system standpoint, trying our best to wiggle in there. I mean, there's one of the good things with COVID is there are some wiggly areas sometimes as far as having people kind of admitted to the hospital, like finding those reasons to admit them to the hospital, and then the facilities accepting them on the other side for that rehab part. Sometimes that'll work, but it's huge.
Yeah.
Huge thing.
These are those sticky ones that we're all, at least for me, I'm always nervous that people think we don't want to help. And it's just like, we don't know any better than anybody else here how to.
Well, that's one of the reasons that we did this GSB is we want to have some kind of a resource place for people to go, because as a court, we would love to help. And we feel terrible when university hospitals call us and say, do you have a guardian? We're like, no, actually, we don't. We have a wait list. So we certainly understand you guys can't keep him in the hospital, but we would like to be able to do something. We would like to be able to provide some service to this poor man, who, is on his own. And that's really why this all came about, is every one of these cases that came through our court, we
didn't have great tools.
So many. And I thought somebody raised, I don't see it anymore now. It was on my screen. It said
Hi.
Donna.
Donna.
Yes.
Yeah. Hi. I got cut off, so I missed the start of this case. But were either of these cases adult protective service cases?
No.
No. Okay. I just wondered because, every county has a different level of adult protective services, and some counties have more staff, and but I think that
We have one in Portage County.
Yeah,
One
that's
caseworker on
Yep,
APS.
there you go. That's what I thought. So small,
Very small.
mighty, right? Yeah, I was just thinking about from where I sit with adult protective services in our county, and this would have been a case of possibly, obviously, some self-neglect and neglect the fact that he didn't know that his wife had died. That would have and could have been a start where you would have had at least an APS worker who could have went in and investigated and maybe began linking him to some supports, while at the same time the guardianship was being considered, processing, or whatever the next steps would have been. In regards to the family, I mean, the family found him, found that she had passed, and I'm sitting here going, well, who was the family and what kind of support could they have been? And and my brain goes, how long had she been passed when finally somebody showed up at the house? So I'm pretty inquisitive about all the details probably, but and what kind of supports could they have been or could be in the situation? Are they a neglectful family, and this man and his wife were out on their own with no supports? What does that look like in regards to a caregiving situation?
Yeah, Donna, sometimes what we find is that a lot of times family members really just don't want to be involved anymore for whatever reason, and it's very sad. And then we're stuck with that aspect. And just as it relates to your comment about APS, so as judge, I am in pretty constant contact with our director of JFS, and we've had several meetings with our director as it relates to APS and what they're going to do about it. And she's working on building it. They did not know that in Portage County, and Heather, please feel free to jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, we never had an APS filing ever in our probate court. So,
Wow.
Right. That's what I said. So I was here for 2.5 years, and I said, are you telling me there is not a person out there who is an adult who is in need of protective services in a county of about 160-some thousand people? So we have been working with them, and we had our first APS filing Friday.
Oh, great.
So, not that we're begging for them. We just know there's people out there who are in need of these services and we want them to get them.
Right.
So, so it is being addressed. And I expect we'll have more filings, although with one worker, right.
Difficult.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
thank you for your comments.
You're welcome. We have a volunteer. Well, we have an adult guardianship services program here in Summit County as well. And we have a volunteer component to that. And so we do have volunteers that agree to take, but it's an indigent program. Our program is for the indigent.
We are working on that part of it as well. We just started, unfortunately, as GSB. She just got here 2 weeks ago, but we are looking at that volunteer component as well, so that we have some people out there willing to, to take these cases after they've been trained, of course, and help us out with that. So thank you.
And I had a question, and then I see it popped up. Marty, we must think alike. Are there any long-term care facilities that you could partner with for respite services, at least to buy you some time? I know there's no longer a county home, but just wondering if there's something that you could partner with on your new organization to see if someone would offer a respite bed at least for a few days, so that you could investigate a little more.
And I expect that Diana is going to look into that. Certainly we're going to look for every resource we can. And what we have found so far is, what I will say about Portage County is I have never met a more giving community. And I expect Diana will be welcomed with open arms by everyone, because when we started talking about doing this, every community partner was excited, from Family and Community Services to JFS to Direction Home to everyone. So I expect we're going to get, I think we're going to get a lot of help. We just got started. So I can't really answer that definitively, but I am sure Diana's listening and she's going to look into it.
As we keep building up our partnerships and, the lines of communication, Judge Smith has been really good at, I like to say, kicking down doors and making sure everybody knows, we will take phone calls. We call back. We want to work with people. We don't want to duplicate services. We want to lift everybody up, kind of serve this community as best we can together. We're not looking to, stomp on anybody, just work better together and fill up the gaps. So it's nice to see everybody kind of rally. Like she said, everybody's really excited and wants to correct it. It's just, we don't, the systems aren't necessarily there, and want to make sure we're employing best practices, seeing that, we're working well with all different partners, even the ones we might not be directly touching and concerning, but maybe that are 2 steps away, that we know the people we serve are dependent on, and making sure we're all kind of working together for their benefit.
We have a question in the chat that said, where would a person like John, whoops, went away. Hold on a second. Where would a person like John Doe be provided care and support if he is unable to care for himself, where there is not a guardian available? Would there be a temporary stay at SNF? What does the court do presently with people in these situations?
So I can answer. So with John Doe, what he did was, after 6 weeks of being in the hospital, basically using it as a hotel, the hospital paid for his first month at a long-term care facility until we could get a guardian appointed.
Thank you, Norma.
Sure.
And then somebody else asked, any Medicaid NF placement, the person would have to meet the PASRR level of care needs. Sometimes the hospitals think having an NF placement court order is enough. I don't know what that means. So somebody maybe can answer that. Norma, do you know what that means, Heather? It's from Jennifer Reed.
Well, this is Jennifer. Oh, sometimes when we're processing a level of care for the hospitals and they have a court order for NIF placement, they think that that means it's an automatic coverage. And that's not always the
right.
case, because if there is no Medicaid, we can't do the level of care. They also have to meet the level of care need, which sometimes it might be more of a mental health issue than someone with dementia, and a couple of these cases that have been discussed, that they're making choices instead of having a need.
Agreed.
So they have to pass the PASSRs, the pre-admission screening, for nursing home placement. And if that were to go for a further review from mental health or the Department of DD, and they deny them, there is no level of care need then. We can't place them just because there's a court order.
Right.
So that
And
gets
this individual
frustrating for the
passed.
hospitals and the nursing homes.
I think our real hope is going forward, like Donna said, this would have been a great case for APS to jump in temporarily. There's obviously a need, try to assess what's going on. What services was, John Doe currently receiving, if any, what could he get and could have qualified for that maybe was not applied for, and hope to set those things up. But this is why building those community partnerships is so important, because we walked into a court where historically, as the judge said, adult protective service cases were not being filed in Portage County. So if there is not that relationship to be able to go, hey, you should be calling APS, not us, and thinking there'd be any follow through. Because that just isn't what was happening. So trying to show that there's not much that the court's not going to just write an order because somebody called, called on the phone and said, hey, we got somebody here, you got to get them out. There's no medical need. That's not how courts work. Just like you need a certain level of care to qualify for long-term care. If it doesn't exist, you can't make it up. If we don't have a case, we don't write orders. So some of this is where we want to, be helpful, but we're not the appropriate provider or agency or whatever you want to say in that situation. So
Does anybody have anything else on the sample situation number 2?
I was just going to ask one quick question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there isn't, but I'm wondering, is there any like a foster care type program, similar to a foster care program for people, for the elderly in this case, where there's people that would take them in until placement's found for them someplace? I mean, it's so complicated because of health issues and mental health issues and everything else. But is there any kind of program like there is for children going to a foster care program before they find a home? Is there anything like that for people in this situation?
There are some. DD does have some emergency placement options. Norma has worked more in this field than me, and I should probably just defer to her. She's usually the one we send out when they are awarded to find placements, but there are some emergency placements. For VA has some emergency placements if they're a veteran. I don't know that APS does around here, like you guys suggesting respite care, mainly because this is a very underfunded, underutilized section of our jobs and family services here in this county. We're hoping that they pay more attention as time goes on, but right now I'm not really even sure what services they all offer.
So
Norma,
most of the senior homes are privately run, and they are usually private pay. So you would have to have a funding source to ask someone to take in a person and care for them until we resolve the financial issue. And that was the same with most of the nursing homes that were asked to take this person. They declined because they did not want to take the risk of not receiving their payments.
Okay. Sample situation number 3. Norma, you want to read this one? And
Okay.
Thank
So this was a retirement aged adult that was diagnosed with cancer, and he refused to participate in any of the treatment. So when his family found out that, they wanted to come to the court and use our court to determine that he was incompetent and overrule his decision on that.
And the family provided an expert evaluation recommending guardianship.
They did, yes.
All right, comments? Questions?
Does he have a power of attorney of healthcare?
They did not.
Mm. And does he have I mean, I don't know if you all saw or talked to him. I mean, there was a statement of expert evaluation, but did he have an understanding or the capacity to understand what not having treatment would mean, or even, I mean, having treatment, but understanding what treatment was and meant for him?
Well, the evaluation said that he didn't understand that. But what ended up happening in this case was we received another evaluation and determined that he actually did know what he was not consenting to, I guess.
And my question is, it says retirement age adult. You can retire at 55 or at 75. Did it mention, do we know his age?
He was early 60s.
Oh, okay.
And was his limited capacity related to the cancer, or did he have an underlying dementia?
No.
Too? No. So was the cancer, so no to either? Wow. And do we know what stage?
Either of those situations.
And do we know what stage the cancer was?
It was pretty advanced.
Mm-hmm. I mean, my experience is most people know if they would want treatment or not at certain levels of cancer.
Does the primary care doctor weigh in on the possibility of competency or incompetency for somebody in that situation?
That's going to be up to the applicant, who they call for a witness, and the alleged ward, who they call. If they want to bring their primary physician in, they could. In some cases, we have had a primary physician come in. Other times, they've not gotten their own competing statement of expert evaluation, or they've went to a totally different doctor. But that's really up to the parties.
Why was the family pushing for him to have treatment?
They just didn't agree with the decision.
Yeah.
For him, that he chose to not do the treatment.
When you consider his age, you might want to consider how old the children are going to be. If he's in his early 60s, the children could be in mid-30s to mid-40s. They have not had much experience with death. They probably not had much experience with disability, and therefore they don't believe that people are ever going to die.
Was there a wife involved or just kids?
Actually, it wasn't kids, it was
I think
siblings.
his siblings, sisters and brothers.
No spouse. It was siblings and wanting to be appointed.
So what do you do when you have competing evals, competing findings from those evals? One saying yes, one saying no.
As a court, there are rules that we go through with giving weight to expert evaluations, and some of it really just has to do with the fact that there's going to be more than just the medical evidence. That's only one piece of the evidence. So sometimes one is more compelling than another, and the rules will dictate that. They've had, this has been a patient maybe longer, maybe there's been more tests, it was a more comprehensive test. Somebody spent an hour reviewing a record versus this person was the one who created that record and had been with them for 10 years and seen it. And so then we can sometimes give a little more weight to that expert that was the one who performed the test, evaluated the test. But then there are sometimes those tests are also ripped apart by another doctor or expert to say that they weren't performed in compliance. So there's all sorts of rules, and looking at how much weight expert testimony will be given by a court. And, jurists are guided by those rules to giving it weight. Obviously, juries, you'd have to pull juries, but I would say sometimes it's really who connects better with the jury. It's not necessarily better scientific, evidence, but that person connected with the jury, so they became more believable to the jury. And therefore the jury will give it, that person more weight, or that expert more weight. But we hear it all and then we apply the rules of evidence.
Did he have any other problems?
Health problems?
Yes.
Nothing that was substantial. If there was nothing that really came out in the court record, they were minor.
With it being his siblings, I would wonder if his decision's a lot different than what he would normally, how he would normally make his decisions about his health care. I mean, I would be kind of wondering why they would question it. And think about whether that might be part of it.
I was wondering too, the history of the involvement with the siblings. Was it sporadic or was it very close in terms of his healthcare decisions?
Unfortunately, when it comes to, the court analysis, it's not about his relationships. We're looking for that expert opinion on competency. We're not judges of competency. That's the medical field. But I think it helps if they, would have been a history, like somebody, I think right away, and I'm sorry, I can't remember who brought it up, having a healthcare power of attorney in place, and somebody who's maybe been familiar with your medical history, even if it's just to bring them in, make sure your medical team is aware too, that this is a person who's on my healthcare power of attorney. If one day I can't answer and communicate with my healthcare team, this is who I want you to put a face to the name on that piece of paper in your chart, and they should know what's going on as it's happening, because it's really a difficult place for an agent to step in if they don't know what's going on, over time. You don't know the person you're supposed to be making decisions for has diabetes or has been treating cancer or something. It's kind of an unfair position. You can't really force then an agent either. And then everybody always has an opinion, so siblings think they know better. Spouses sometimes think they, well, if they could answer, this is what they'd say. And if you don't agree, they come to court.
And these are pretty simple, we're not giving you all the facts of the cases. But, what we find is when we actually get into the hearing and the people are presenting their evidence and their testimony, we had a guardianship situation in which an elderly gentleman had an expert eval done by his long-term physician, and the long-term physician thought he was competent, and previous administration ordered an independent evaluation, and then COVID hit, and then he couldn't get it done, and then the gentleman got COVID, and then he declined even more, and it was just like this complete debacle. But at the end of the day, after hearing all the evidence, it was very clear that at the time he was making his decisions as it related to his powers of attorney and all those kind of things that he actually did do, that he was competent. And so, we're given simplistic kind of examples just for discussion purposes. But when we actually get down to it in court, it's a lot easier to make those decisions as the jurist, because that's part of the whole court process, is we get to judge credibility, and not that we would find a doctor not credible, but the attorneys are going to ask the questions, how well do you know this person? Or did you just see him for 20 minutes, where we have a physician who maybe had been treating him for 10 years. So we get that from the court hearing, and it helps us to make those decisions. But I will say, in 2.5 years being on the bench, I have seen more crazy cases than I ever thought possible. So they're all out there. And I have to tell you that, we run into these situations pretty regularly. And, that's why we are really hoping that, we work with our community partners and we can all get together and get the help for those folks who actually need it and want it. And, we can service the people that are in this community. So somebody asked a question, and I'm going to apologize right now. Do we have another sample situation, Heather? Or were there just 3?
Just the 3.
All right. I have to go do a hearing. And I apologize. I have to sign off. So there is a question. If you can still read it, I'm going to stop share. So I think it'll just go to your regular screen. Is that correct?
Yeah. You should be able to just drop off.
Okay. And my apologies. Thank you all so much for your time. And I'll let Heather answer that last question in the chat.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Actually, we are over time.
Right now. Okay.
So, if we can, unfortunately, I know there are going to be people that are going to have to leave this meeting.
No problem. If Jennifer, if you got a minute, I'm happy to answer it for you. Or if you got to run, I understand.
It was more of a actually your input on it would be interesting. It was more of a talking point. I didn't recognize what time we are. I think my thought was, especially in this guy who is going to potentially be put through an invasive and long treatment process. I say this all the time, right? People are not going to take their blood pressure medications, and a guardian isn't going to be able to make them take their blood pressure medication. Right? Like it's not a solution. A person is homeless, but is otherwise ambulatory and walking around and has lots of concerns, but a guardian isn't going to
not the solution.
Keep him at a facility unless they're going to put him in a locked facility and sedate him until he can't get up and walk around, right? Exactly. So that was kind of more just as a talking point, and where you guys see it from your end, where the limitations of guardianship are.
I believe you brought up some great points. It's stuff we try to talk to people about, that it's not a magic wand to your problem, and I think those were shining examples that, having a guardianship will not get your schizophrenic son to take his medication, and we have families come in here doing that every day. Will not get your mother to stop drinking. It just, that's not how it works. Guardianship, I would say, in its best form is usually when you have a cooperative, caring relationship between the ward and the guardian, and the guardian's able to assist in maybe navigating the world of insurance and doctor's appointments and prescriptions and, insurance, or writing, a lease, for housing. Guardians are great for those kind of things when you have that cooperative, caring relationship. It's not about forcing somebody to take medications they don't want to take, live, in this neighborhood, in this kind of area, absent, like you said, a lockdown facility with sedation. And even then, that a guardian cannot do without court order. Even with guardianship, the court remains the superior guardian, and the demand that the court makes is that your wards are in the least restrictive, most independent setting as possible that they can handle at all times. Any changes to their living situation, or, if you want to move them to a more restrictive setting, you need to get prior court permission before doing that. So, and this administration believes that fully, that people should be in the least restrictive setting where they're safe, but again, it's a cooperative relationship. I don't think guardianship does anything but frustrate guardians who think it's going to, oh, they're going to take their pills because I'm going to flash this piece of paper. I'm your guardian, and so I said you have to take your meds. Now you're going to. If they don't like their meds and they have a history of not taking their meds, they're still going to not take their meds.
Well, I just want to thank not only Judge Smith, but you, Heather, Diana, and Norma for this great interactive presentation today.